Tonight, we're delving into a story that, honestly, it hits right at the heart of a deep fear. The predator hiding in plain sight, wearing a uniform. We're talking about Jared John Schaefer, a man who used the authority of the badge
Well,
to hunt.
when you look into cases like this kind of violence, you almost always find a background filled with instability. Schaefer's early life, nomadic, really turbulent. His father was abusive, an alcoholic, and they moved constantly. So he spent a lot of time alone, escaping into nearby woods and parks.
And that escape, that solitude, it's often a key sign. Yes, he was getting away from trauma, but it's in that isolation. Well, the sources say he developed some less wholesome interests. This wasn't just a kid needing quiet time. It was like a splitting of his personality was starting to form.
And that's where the darkness really begins to take root. It started with voyeurism, sneaking around, spying through windows, always women. There's this one really disturbing story where he watched a woman and she had no idea. The source says she unknowingly gave Jared quite a show, chilling. Right. And looking wasn't enough for long. It shifted to wanting possession, wanting control. He stole a woman's underwear from a clothesline. And it wasn't just like a fetish thing. He described this deep compulsion. He actually said he felt like he'd stolen a piece of her along with the clothing.
Wow. That need to possess, to completely control and violate, that became his driving force.
Right.
But on the surface, completely different person. Quiet kid, promising athlete, played varsity football. Apparently he was some kind of golfing wonder kid down in the Florida Keys, building this perfect exterior.
Well, inside, his mind was just consumed with these fantasies, bondage, sadomasochism. It's that contrast that's so deeply unsettling. The clean-cut athlete image versus, well, these dark private rituals. We know he practiced tying himself up sometimes to trees out in the woods, wearing the stolen clothes. It's like he was rehearsing.
Yeah, rehearsing. And that internal chaos, it inevitably seeped into his relationships. His first marriage to Martha Fogg in '68, volatile from day one. Sources say he demanded sex constantly but offered zero emotional connection. He'd just disappear on these long solo hunting trips.
He wanted the control, definitely not the commitment part of the relationship. Martha filed for divorce pretty quickly, May 1970, cited extreme cruelty. And this pattern of failure, it wasn't just personal, he tried teaching.
A position of authority, right? Total disaster.
Fired twice, back to back.
Yeah.
First time for pushing his political views on students, refusing advice. Second time, just 4 months later. Poor performance and what his colleagues called this really obnoxious arrogance.
So, okay, here's a guy with this profound need for control, for authority, and he's failing everywhere. Marriage, career. So what's next?
Yep.
He finds the one place where he can get that authority legally sanctioned.
Exactly. September 1970. Applies to the Wilton Manors Police. Becomes a patrolman at 25. And how does he get the job? He lies. Just leaves out the part about being fired twice. A lie of omission. And right there, that's the first major system failure. He did get one commendation early on, March '72, for courageous conduct in a drug raid. Okay. But overall, his performance was poor. And the really alarming thing was how he started using that uniform.
He quickly got this reputation, a really nasty one. He was pulling over only women. Traffic stops weren't about traffic laws for him. It was about getting their names, addresses, personal details for later.
It got so blatant that someone made a public complaint that forced him to resign. But, and this is critical, the department let him resign with a letter of recommendation just to avoid hassle, maybe a lawsuit, who knows. But that letter basically washed his record clean for the next employer.
Unbelievable. So he was immediately employable again.
You got it. His next stop, Martin County Sheriff's Office, June 1972. They only checked for a criminal record. They didn't check his work history. Less than 3 months after being forced out for harassing women, Jared Schaefer had a badge again. And this time, even less oversight.
And he wasted no time. Just weeks later, July 1st, 1972, he's on patrol. Picks up 2 teenage hitchhikers, Nancy Trotter, 18, and Paula Wells, 17. He plays the nice guy cop. Offers them a ride to Jensen Beach the next morning. Seems like a kind gesture. Next day, he shows up in his own car, plain clothes, but convinces them he's still on official police duty. Suggests a detour. Hutchinson Island. And that's when the shift happens. The psychological games begin.
Yeah, the girls said later, as he drove, he started talking about these like shadowy human trafficking rings, warning them about criminals who kidnapped girls to be lobotomized servant girls.
He wasn't warning them, though, was he? He was priming them, telling them exactly what he planned to do, but framing it like he was the protector.
It's textbook manipulation, using fear to establish dominance, making them see him as the authority, the safe one, right before he flips the script.
He cops the car, pulls a gun, marches them into the woods, The details here are just meticulous and horrifying. Nancy Trotter tied to a big cypress tree, legs tied, and then a noose around her neck.
Yeah, and the noose wasn't tight, not initially. It was positioned so she had to stand on her tiptoes constantly. If she relaxed, she'd strangle herself. Pure torture. Both girls testified later that Schaefer seemed to get pleasure, like actual visible enjoyment from telling them they were about to be tortured, violated, and killed.
And then just sheer dumb luck intervenes.
Yeah.
Right as he's about to start, the police radio he carried, the one that gave him that fake legitimacy, it crackles to life.
The county sheriff himself calls Schaefer by name, orders all reserve officers to report immediately, some kind of emergency.
Schaefer's reaction, pure arrogance. He just looks at these girls, tied up, terrified, and says, "I gotta go, but don't try to run away because I'll be back in just a minute." He genuinely thought the terror alone would keep them there.
But it didn't. Nancy Trotter, she was terrified, obviously, but she fought, managed to wriggle against the ropes, used some exposed tree roots under her feet to get leverage, and got free. Schaefer was gone for about 2 hours. When he came back and they were gone, he didn't panic and run. He called the sheriff's office, admitted he'd done something very foolish, but he tried to spin it, saying he was just teaching the girls a lesson about hitchhiking.
The girls told the real story, thankfully. He was arrested. But then, the system fails again. Spectacularly.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, he posts bail. $15,000. And the trial outcome in December 72, just unbelievable. Convicted of only one charge of aggravated assault, the sentence. 1 year, with possible parole after 6 months.
1 year for kidnapping, torture setup, attempted murder, essentially. Publicly, he played the remorse card, told reporters, "I made a stupid mistake, but no one was hurt. I'm sorry, please forgive me."
But inside, sources say he was thrilled. He actually believed he'd, quote, quite literally gotten away with murder. And the truly sickening part is, he was right. He already had.
Because we have to face the timeline here. Between that July abduction of Nancy and Paula and his trial in December, he killed, September 1972. He abducted Susan Place, 17, and her friend Georgia Jessup, who was 16.
Susan's mom actually saw the car, his 1969 Datsun, and got the license plate number. Smart move. But when the police ran the plate, dead end, led to someone totally unrelated. Schaefer had switched the plates. His car, what police later called his butcher's wagon, was effectively invisible off the grid.
So the police hit a wall, but the truth came out later. Well, Schaefer was actually in jail serving that joke of a sentence. April 1st, 1973. A father and son are walking in Oak Park. They find a shallow grave.
And what they uncovered, it's beyond disturbing. The remains of Susan Place and Georgia Jessup. Horrifically mutilated. This wasn't quick. This was planned, drawn-out cruelty.
The evidence showed absolute control. Both girls' spinal cords were severed, neck and lower back. The thinking is, terrifyingly, that this was maybe to paralyze them, control them during the attack. Both were decapitated. Their jawbones were shattered from severe beating.
And the scene itself echoed his known rituals. Deep scratches on a tree nearby suggested at least one of them had been suspended, tied up, fulfilling those bondage fantasies. And carved into the tree bark, the initials GJ.
Now, first thought might be Georgia Jessup, right? GJ. But investigators, knowing Schaefer's narcissism, his need for control, they started thinking differently. They realized it was probably him signing his work. Jared John.
Oh, God. The full picture, the true scale of his horror, it emerged when police raided his mother's house. But they found there wasn't just evidence. It was like a blueprint of his depraved mind.
Under his bed, over 300 pages of journals, but not like diaries. This was handwritten fiction. Lurid, dark, illustrated fiction about kidnapping, torture, violation, execution by hanging. His entire fantasy world written down.
And the line between fantasy and reality was completely blurred. One passage graphically described going back to graves, digging up bodies, pulling teeth. Investigators determined later this wasn't fiction. It was a factual account of him desecrating Susan and George's remains.
It's just sickening. And then there was the final piece. A small golden jewelry box. Inside, passports, clothes, jewelry, belonging to multiple missing women. Lee Heinlein Bonadies, missing since 69. Colette Marie Goodenough, missing since 73. Barbara Ann Wilcox. Others.
It confirmed their worst fears. Susan and Georgia weren't the first. Not even close. And hidden elsewhere on the property. They found teeth fragments, bone fragments, from at least 18 different victims. This man wasn't just a bad cop. He was a prolific serial killer operating for years from behind the shield.
Police ended up characterizing him as an eliminator of women he judged as immoral. He was charged finally with 2 counts of first-degree murder in May 1973. Even with the journals, the bodies, the jewelry, he pleaded not guilty. Nancy Trotter and Paula Wells, the survivors, they testified, relived their terror.
The jury didn't take long. Guilty. 5 hours. He got life in prison. Many wanted the death penalty, of course. But Susan Place's mother, Lucille, had this chilling perspective. She said, I think people suffer more with confinement. Death is the easy way out, just as long as he's never on the streets again.
And confinement, in the end, was where his story concluded. December 3rd, 1995, Jared Schaefer was found dead in his cell.
Not natural causes. He'd been stabbed over 40 times. Face, head, neck, body. His throat was slashed. Justice. Maybe not from the system, but it found him. Georgia Jessup's mother heard the news and called it a case of long overdue justice. She added, he's finally gotten the death sentence he ultimately deserved. You know, stories like Schaefer's, they force you to look beyond just the individual evil. You have to look at the cracks in the system that let it happen. The bad policies, the negligent background checks, the way authority can be so easily abused. Sometimes the system's failures are almost as terrifying as the killer himself. Sheriff Robert Crowder summed it up well after the investigation. He said, the families of the victims, as well as the men in law enforcement who work these cases, none of these people will ever be the same again. A shadow that truly never fades. If you find these explorations into the darker side of true crime compelling, make sure you're following our channel, Horror Docx. Please hit that like button if this story resonated with you, share it, and definitely subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive. Thanks for listening.